There are valleys that echo with laughter, and those that carry only the weight of what went unsaid. Boscombe is the latter. Here, there are no grand conspiracies, no masterminds weaving chaos for the thrill. Only a pool beneath ash-colored trees, a son kneeling beside a father's body, and the questions that linger long after justice claims to have answered them. This is not a puzzle for entertainment. This is a wound drawn out in footsteps and in silence. What follows is my retelling of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Boscombe Valley Mystery. It is quiet, it is careful, and it does not end clean. Take a breath, step softly, let the valley tell its truth. The Boscombe Valley Mystery. The morning had been ordinary. My wife and I were just sitting down to breakfast, tea cooling, toast waiting, when the maid stepped in, a telegram in hand. No knock, just urgency wrapped in paper. It was from Holmes. Of course it was. Got a case, Boscombe Valley. You free? He'd added, air's good, leave Paddington at 11:15. Even after all the years, Holmes still treated a murder like an excuse to travel. I folded the note without a word and met my wife's glance. She didn't ask the obvious questions. She just gave me that soft smile she reserved for moments like these, the ones when I'd already decided to go before saying a thing. By noon, I was on a train bound west with Holmes at my side. The countryside slipped past the window in long streaks of green and gold. But he wasn't paying attention. He was quiet, pipe in hand, eyes narrowed, not staring at anything in particular, but thinking in that impossibly fast, layered way of his. He didn't speak for miles. That was always my signal. Something about the case was already alive in his mind, growing behind the eyes. He'd share it when it made sense, never before. Eventually, he broke the silence. So here's what we've got. His voice was even. A man named Charles McCarthy, found dead near Boscombe Pool in Herefordshire. Blunt force trauma, local constable arrested his son, James. No real investigation, just shock and a hunch. Lestrade's out there already, and he's asked for help. I nodded. Lestrade, I thought. Competent enough, but if he's sending for Holmes, he knows it's beyond him. Holmes leaned back, fingers steepled. The son's maintaining his innocence. The timeline's tight. Witnesses flimsy. What really struck me, Watson, was this. He held up a note that had arrived after the telegram. It's from someone local. She says James McCarthy is innocent. Not hopes, not thinks, says. That caught my attention. Who? I asked. Miss Alice Turner, daughter of another landholder in the valley. Holmes raised an eyebrow. She's the one who wrote Lestrade as well. I suspect she knows more than she dares say. A valley, a body, a boy in chains, and a girl trying to pry truth from silence. I glanced again out at the train window. Trees blurred past like pages unread. I could feel the storm ahead in Holmes' stillness. We arrived at Boscombe Station just after midday. The sun hung heavy behind a gauze of clouds, and the air had that peculiar countryside hush, as if the world were holding its breath. The valley itself felt old, not in the way of age measured by time, but by memory. Roads cut through fields that had known secrets long before men ever buried them. Lestrade met us at the station. He was sharp as ever, polished boots, curt tone, and an expression just shy of defensive. Glad you came, he said without quite meaning it. Looks clean enough to me, but Holmes, I know how you like your little puzzles. Holmes didn't rise to the jab. He rarely did. Walk me through it, he said instead. Charles McCarthy had been found dead near the edge of Boscombe Pool, a small stagnant stretch of water surrounded by ash trees and overgrowth. He'd gone out with his son James the morning of the murder. Witnesses placed them arguing. The next time anyone saw Charles, he was dead, head crushed by a blunt object. His son had blood on his hands and confusion in his eyes. Lestrade's version was quick and tidy. The boy did it in a fit of rage. There was a quarrel. Everyone heard them. The son's gone quiet since. Won't explain what it's about. He shrugged. Not much more to it, really. Holmes said nothing, but his eyes missed nothing either. We walked to the scene together. The path dipped into a soft slope, and the trees thickened the closer we got to the water. There was a hush here even the birds respected. Holmes crouched near the edge of the pool, fingers skimming the grass. You see the footprints? I nodded. They were faint, but visible. 2 pairs leading in, 1 leading away. And notice here? Look where this patch is pressed. A cane was used. Broad end. Heavy man, right-handed. Holmes traced the crushed blades with his fingertip. Someone stood here. Watched. I followed his gaze to a shadowed area beneath a leaning tree. The impression in the ground was subtle, something only Holmes would have caught. He was being followed? I asked. Holmes didn't answer. He stood slowly, eyes scanning the canopy overhead. Then, quietly, there's something wrong with the silence here. The innkeeper's parlor where we met Alice Turner was modest. Lace-curtained windows, a hearth that hadn't been lit in days, and a faint scent of lavender trying to soften the weight of what was unsaid. Alice stood when we entered, young, composed, but her eyes, those betrayed how long she'd been holding something in. Holmes gave her a small nod, not encouraging, not gentle, just listening. You wrote to Inspector Lestrade, he said. She clasped her hands together. Yes, I didn't know who else would believe me. Her voice faltered. James didn't kill his father. He couldn't have. Holmes didn't ask why, not yet. He circled instead. Tell me what you know of their relationship, father and son. She hesitated. There were arguments. James, he hated how his father drank, how he treated people. But there was no hate in him, none. And that morning, she swallowed. I saw James. He was shaken, confused, but not cruel, not violent. Holmes tilted his head slightly. And what of the land? The laces? Was there pressure from Charles McCarthy? That opened something. She blinked, startled. There was talk. My father owns much of the adjoining property. Mr. McCarthy pushed for something between our families. Marriage? She nodded. To me, but not for love. He saw consolidation. A land deal in lace. It landed like a stone in my stomach. Holmes stood, no dramatics, no parting reassurance, just, you've helped more than you know. That evening, we walked the perimeter of the pool again. The sky had darkened to bruise-colored clouds, and somewhere in the trees a bird trilled once before going quiet. Holmes stopped at the same patch he'd studied earlier. He crouched, tracing again the faint impressions. His brow furrowed deeper this time. The man who followed them. He stood here, watched. Didn't intervene. He tapped the earth. Right shoe drags. Injury, maybe? Or a limp? I folded my arms against the sudden wind. What are you seeing, Holmes? He straightened. Something older than murder? A choice postponed so long it turned to rot? McCarthy died for more than an argument. James McCarthy sat behind iron bars, though the cell was more ceremonial than confining. A small village gaol, cracked windows and all. He looked young, not in the way of years, but in the way grief stops time for a person carrying it. When we entered, he stood, unshaven and pale. His hands shook once before he hid them behind his back. Holmes was direct. You're innocent, he said, not as a question. But you're hiding something. McCarthy's eyes flicked between us. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I could feel the weight of it, the thing that didn't belong in a courtroom but lived behind his ribs. Holmes softened just slightly. I'm not here to trap you, James, but the truth, your truth, might save your life. That worked, just enough. I did argue with him, he admitted. His voice was thin, like a rope stretched too far. He was forcing something, between myself and Miss Turner. My father wanted it for land, not love. I told him I couldn't go through with it. He struck me. I left. That's the truth. I left him by the pool and walked away. Holmes leaned forward. You returned? James hesitated. I heard something. A cry? But when I went back, he was already on the ground, bleeding. I tried to help. I didn't know what else to do. Holmes nodded. and the figure you saw in the woods." James stiffened. "I wasn't sure. I thought it looked like Miss Turner's father, just for a second, but He broke off. "I couldn't accuse him. He's been good to us." Outside the cell, Holmes was quiet. Then, "It's always the things that aren't said aloud that speak the loudest, Watson." We returned to Boscombe Pool the next morning. Fog clung to the water, and the ash tree stood crooked, like old men whispering secrets to each other. Holmes didn't speak until we'd reached the edge again. He pointed to the gouge in the bark we'd seen yesterday, fresh, low, and angled. "Left by a cane. The same one from the footprint impression. This ash tree saw the truth." I stood beside him. "But Holmes, if it was Miss Turner's father, why would the boy protect him?" Holmes lit his pipe, gaze never leaving the water. "Because some truths ruin more than one life, and some debts, Watson, run blood deep." The morning air had turned sharp, like something had snapped behind the hills. Holmes and I returned to Hatherley Farm, Alice Turner's home, where her father, Mr. John Turner, was waiting. He looked ill, not the kind you catch, but the kind that catches up with you. His face was pale, eyes sunken, skin sagging with the weight of some long unspoken thing. Holmes offered him no preamble. "Mr. Turner," he said, quiet and firm, "the truth has been circling this valley for years. I think it's time you let it land." Turner didn't respond at first. He looked down at his hands that had once built estates, written deals, pushed a cane into soft earth while his rage took root. Then he handed Holmes a letter. "You can give this to the coroner when I'm gone." His voice was thin as paper. "I killed Charles McCarthy. Not for his threats. Not really. It was what he knew." Years ago, before the wealth and estate, Turner had lived under another name. In Australia, a convict, eventually a prospector, he'd built a new life, scrubbed clean, but McCarthy had known the old one, and now McCarthy was blackmailing him into forcing a marriage between James and Alice to bind the land together. "He threatened to ruin my daughter's life just to get more land," Turner said. "I followed him to the pool. I told him to stop. He laughed. Said it was too late. So His shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean to kill him. I couldn't let him win." Outside, the trees had fallen still again. Even the wind had quieted, as though it were listening. Holmes said nothing for a long while, then, "The law may never know your confession, but I will, and I think that will suffice." We left the valley that evening, the shadows of ash trees trailing us all the way to the station. The trial never took place. Turner passed within the month. Pneumonia, they said, but I think the guilt had simply run its course. James McCarthy was released. Alice stood beside him in the rain outside the courthouse. Neither of them smiled, not at first. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as if daring the world to try again. Epilogue: The quiet weight of knowing. Some cases close with the clang of a cell door, others with applause or headlines. But this one ended with a funeral, a letter, and silence hanging over a valley like morning mist. Turner died as he lived, alone in his guilt, shielding the one thing he loved with the last breath he had to give. The boy walks free now, and the girl beside him, but the scars will outlive the verdict. Holmes said little after we left Boscombe. He just looked out the train window, the countryside rolling past like pages too heavy to turn. I knew better than to speak. Sometimes the truth doesn't set anyone free. It just stops the bleeding. Some stories leave no one unscathed. Not the victims, not the guilty, not even those who carry the truth forward. Thank you for listening to this retelling of the Boscombe Valley mystery. If it lingered with you or left you with questions of your own, then it's done its job. For more stories like this, more voices pulled from shadow and silence, consider joining me again. Your presence keeps these echoes alive. Until next time, keep listening, keep wondering, and keep the lantern lit.